Hello all, this is the TM Bomb working group for threat modeling. I found the record button. We lost the first 10 minutes, but thank you for joining.
Zoom keeps moving the record button. That's why you can find it.
That's my excuse, at least today anyway. I can't use that excuse on my next meeting though.
They'll have moved it by then.
Should make a game out of that.
Gamifying record buttons.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess that by now the point that we have reached is that Petra is free to run with the format that she needs for her project, and we are probably going to adapt from that and get to whatever standard we reach at some point.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a fair assumption. I think, the work that Petra is doing, I think is, we can certainly use it for inspiration. I think there's some really good things that she's done in the spec as it is today. And, we've provided her some feedback. We need a ton of extensibility and a bunch of other things that the spec currently doesn't have. But I think it's, there's some really good thought that went into building that. And we can kind of build off some of the ideas that are in there for sure.
And in terms of extensibility, give me I think a week. I am planning to put something in. I just need to speak to also Julian, who's doing the project with me. He has some good ideas about extensibility. But I forgot what he said and he got really busy too. So I'm planning to catch up with him. I might come out with a proposal to have more flexible extensibility. So
Okay.
that is definitely true. That's what is lacking. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Now, I had a question, Steve. In the whole ecosystem, do we have something that covers use cases or stories or something like that?
The specification currently only supports like if you're backporting a security vulnerability, for example, it supports like a link to like the ticket in Jira or whatever that you're tracking that work in, but it doesn't currently support like use cases or requirements or that sort of thing. It supports requirements as they relate to like standards like BSIM or OWASP SAM or some of those things, but not like requirements in like building software, for example. That those types of requirements are not currently part of that, but we do plan to add support for that. Because it's what we're going to be doing is using the use cases and the requirements to meet those use cases, not only for the threat modeling work, but we're also tying it back to the behavior work that we're also simultaneously working on. We currently have a taxonomy of behaviors that has been donated to us from one of the commercial vendors that is providing a solution to monitor the behavior of software as kind of a starting point for that. But we want to tie like the use cases and requirements back to the behaviors so that you can see anomalies, when you are analyzing that software or, monitoring it at runtime. But ultimately, we want to tie it back to the threat modeling work as well.
Exactly. The reason I'm asking is because I've been having conversations with Kim offline, and it looks like a lot of the privacy stuff is actually going to come from proposed use cases and from how they're met, and they are not covered by the security controls that we have in place. So if we want to add privacy to the threat modeling BOM, we're going to have to link up back to use cases and requirements.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, that kind of also highlights the fact that indeed we haven't really figured it out. So I want to be careful in putting too much in there that might not make that much sense.
Yeah.
So we can put stuff in there, but yeah, we have been discussing the whole context idea much more. For privacy really depends on all the stuff around it. So we can put some objective facts in there, but capturing the broader context that you need as a use case, for instance, to really assess it, it's kind of hard to formalize what that would mean, at least to us at this point. So we can make a suggestion, or we can decide to drop it for now and keep it for a future iteration.
No, we really want to put that in there now, I think. The use case, so like if you have a use case on, you know, I don't know, let's do like MailChimp or some kind of mass mailing type of thing as a, that is my use case, be able to mass send email to subscribers. And obviously I'm going to have a ton of requirements, both technical and non-technical requirements for that. And some of those requirements could in fact be privacy related, right? How do you unsubscribe? How do you, whatever. I think that should likely be in the first iteration of the spec for this capability, because I think it's really important that we start capturing that. And the sooner, one thing that we've realized, and it's, you know, it's obvious in hindsight, but it's once you start adding things to the spec, you want to do it in a way that's going to be, you know, obviously backward compatible. So even though you haven't figured everything out yet, you want to do it in a way that you can kind of build upon in the future while you figure more things out. But the sooner you get it in there, the sooner people can start adopting it. And generally, we've seen around 2 years or so for, you know, this new advanced kind of capability to the point where organizations actually start adopting. So just because we have it on the release day doesn't mean there's going to be tools and processes and, you know, organizations are not going to be using it. It's going to take generally around 2 years for that to really happen.
So I want to ask a question. How does it on a practical level look like? I like how you gave the example with MailChimp and the requirements. So on the threat modeling side, does that mean we would just take those requirements as part of the threat model and make sure that in the control we also mention those requirements?
Yeah,
Or
it
would
should
we
be
look at
all
this from a
referenceable.
different- Okay. I'm just trying to think practically where that would come in into the whole picture. So there would be like a use case potentially at the beginning where you described your threat model, right? Like maybe somewhere like, and then you'd have, based on that use case, you'd have some specific privacy requirements or specific
Right.
legislation requirements.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and then your controls could likely map to those, would be my guess.
Map to those. Okay.
Yeah, so you from a specification perspective, we don't want to assume that you know, when we have use cases and requirements, we don't want to assume that, oh, this must be a threat model, or this has to be used with a threat model, because it could in fact be that some organizations just want to say, here, this is what our software does.
That's what I was thinking. And it doesn't, it could still be like a security review, right? Like it could be like a security architecture review.
Right.
And where you also add these requirements and say that you are compliant to these requirements because they are.
Right.
Is that another specification then that we have to create for that?
Yeah, so it's all about like, there is and there was an email thread the other day on the CISA SBOM mailing list the other day. And, you know, we talk about SBOM and VEX and all this other crap. And really it comes down to, as a consumer, can I trust your software? And the more transparent the vendors are, the more information that they give out in terms of like what works, what should maybe cautionary tales, hey, don't configure it this way type of thing, the more trust you can actually build up with that particular vendor, right? So there's a competitive advantage for the vendors that actually are going to subscribe to that kind of way of thinking, but it's really about assurance. So you can theoretically, you could tie the use cases and requirements into a threat model, or you could tie it into behaviors, or you could tie it into any one of the OWASP verification standards, right? There's a lot of ways that you could use that information, and we want to make it flexible enough that we don't want to assume how the organization is going to be using it.
Okay, I see what you mean. So you're talking about like having a specific separate list of these use cases and requirements based on the use cases.
Yeah.
And then those are also tied to the vendors, right?
Yeah, they're going to be tied to ultimately, they're going to be tied to a product or service, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we want
And then
to
they can
tie
be
them to
referenced.
like the organization as well, here's a requirement at the organizational level. That's something that we could theoretically do as well. But yeah, we want to reuse all these objects. And Cyclone has a way to do this, which itself is an international standard. And the way that Cyclone works is that you could theoretically have this linking capability is essentially it doesn't have to all be in the same document. So like your requirements could in fact be in a separate document, but you can still like deep link to the individual requirement in that document. And we have this this thing that allows us to do that across serialization formats, right? It works with JSON, it works with XML, it works with
Okay.
Protobuf.
Where can I read more about it? Is it in the CycloneDX repo?
No, it is not actually. It is on the website, however.
Okay.
Let's
Need to
see.
dig into it.
We
I
call it
wanted to
bomb link because we're really creative.
palm link. Okay.
Let's see.
Well, it makes sense. Yeah, because I think you mentioned linking some of the C-bomb stuff to the threat
Yeah,
model as well. And I was thinking, oh, how am I going to link that? That was one of the questions like that I wasn't sure about.
yeah. And this
But I
linking
think that
capability
would be the
is
answer.
right. And this linking capability, and it's, there's there's a document on IANA. So we have a formally registered URN for this. But one of the benefits, besides the obvious modularity that you're going to get, is the fact that now, because these are decoupled, you could theoretically have different authentication and authorization requirements for each one. So I might have an SBOM, right? And maybe the threat model for that component, I only give to maybe a small set of customers. I can link to that threat modeling bomb. And if you have access to it, you'll get it. If not, you won't. So that's one of the benefits of the modularity that many organizations are taking advantage of. Now, once this all is, we're also simultaneously working on this transparency exchange API, which is essentially a normalized model for CycloneDX that is going to be purely an API. And eventually you'll be able to ask the API questions, such as, do you have any known threats against this particular component in this software? And if so, what are my mitigating controls? That could theoretically be a future question that you could ask. Or does this thing have any privacy concerns? Does this, piece of software is it susceptible for log4 shell, and is there anything I need to do about it? Right? It's those types of questions that you could theoretically ask the API in the future.
Okay, but that's going a lot to wait. So that API, it's going to be a standard or it's going to be an actual
Yes.
implementation?
No, it's going to be a standard. So right now we are having a hackathon in Barcelona to actually test beta 1 of the API. The first version of the API is essentially a glorified file server, right? How do you autonomously discover? How do you publish? How do you consume supply chain artifacts such as S bombs and C bombs and whatever kind of bombs, right? That's the first step. The second step, once that part is done, we think currently we are on track to get this complete by this December. So theoretically, if all goes well, that first version of the API will be an ECMA standard in December. Once we have that, the next piece of work is this concept called insights, which is really the ability to ask the API questions. Right now, we're kind of leaning toward using CEL, the Common Expression Language from Google, as a way to kind of walk the normalized model. And that normalized model will basically be a derivative of CycloneDX. So everything that CycloneDX could theoretically represent, that normalized model will also be able to represent. So you could walk the model with CEL, which is something that Dependency Track version 5, which is currently in alpha, is already doing. So we already know that this actually works in practice.
Yeah, and that's going to respond to that first use case that I had back in the beginning, where some scanner finds some vulnerability, and then you can go back to the threat model and link both things together and use that criticality from the beginning to help sort the vulnerability. Cool,
Yeah.
very, very cool, very cool, very cool.
Yeah, we have an entire group of folks working on the API. I participate a little bit, but we've got some really dedicated folks just purely focused on that, on delivering that API. Individual contributors, we got representation from commercial entities, open source projects, etc. So eventually, this standard that we're trying to work on now will be exposed in this normalized model via this API. So short-term file format, longer-term API.
I have a question. I just had to do a bit of compulsory in-house training on risk management. And it's basically everywhere, you know, with service delivery managers, and it's like part and parcel of the culture of the company. But is there like a strong kind of linkage between what these people will be doing in their day-to-day work with, you know, constantly iterating through like risk assessments and stuff like that, and the work of CycloneDX with the threat modeling, the blueprints to encapsulate the design, and so on and so forth?
You could, I think there's going to be, you know, what future state, magic 8-ball. I think more than likely, once all of this is done, that this is likely going to transform how GRC works today. So think of like an organization that procures software, and they've got 10,000 vendors that they do business with, right? Not only are they going to autonomously discover the inventory, like the SBOM and all that kind of crap, for, you know, all the software, but they'll also, because again, it all goes back to that comfy feeling and, you know, some semblance of assurance. So they're going to get the inventory of stuff, but they're also going to get, because Cyclone supports it, any kind of attestations, whether your organization has used SSDF or BSIM, or maybe you've done a threat model. or maybe you've got some CBOM stuff, and that's all going to be theoretically input to some of these large CMDBs. I just happen to work for one of the vendors, but it's going to be essentially input for some of these large CMDB systems that track all of their things. One of the challenges with CMDBs is that they're always wrong. But if you have, and they're always wrong because mostly human entry. But if you have, again, an API and you are using the data from the vendors themselves as raw input to your asset management thing, then all of that is going to be continuously updated for you. And that's going to greatly impact how that organization views GRC in the future.
Yep.
Which is a very, very different path than what we have today. You are familiar with GRC, Mark? I just assumed that you knew what it was. Governance, risk, and compliance. Because you asked a risk question. He's on mute. But really, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. That's what I want to happen. That's what a lot of us want to happen. We'll see.
I think supply chain management, we all really, really want to have it fixed.
Yeah.
But it's still going to take us some time to do it because most companies don't even, okay, if we have the SBOM, that resolves the software part in terms of, development. But then there's like this huge, big dark hole of like knowing your suppliers. And a lot of companies don't even have a list of critical suppliers. So I think we're all super keen to have that issue resolved.
Yeah. Even in the dependency track project, which is a large project for the consumption and analysis of SBOMs, right? And we do other kinds of bombs as well, C bombs and a bunch of other stuff. But even that, I mean, the long-term vision for that is to become more of a supply chain posture management type of platform. And all the work that we're doing for this and the API and everything else kind of feeds into that. If we want a supply chain posture, if supply chain posture management is ever going to be a thing, you need a way to scale the dissemination and consumption of this kind of information. Because there's just too much of it. So where do we go from here? We've got you've got some ideas, Petra, on extensibility. We do extensibility in Cyclone 2 different ways, but it'd be interesting to kind of see how you do it there. When do you think you'd be not that we are reliant upon your spec, but it would be interesting to kind of see what you kind of independently come up with.
Yeah. I can try and share it by end of next week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know Barcelona is like, right.
Yeah. So I can try. I just need to catch Julian because he had some good ideas and I can't remember exactly what, because he told me like in a different conversation. So we will discuss this next week for sure. And I will try to have like that added to the schema straight away next week. And then I'll share it with you.
Okay.
Cool. And you're going to share it on the Cyclone Slack or where? Or directly?
Yes, I need to share it there. Right? That's the place to share it. I've just not entered that channel for, again, also same reasons like you guys, 100 things on my mind. But yes, I shall do it there and I need to do it there.
Yeah. I will also try to, I'm working on a ton of different things as well, all simultaneously. I will try to at least create the branch for the TM bomb, get the maybe the requirements. I'm starting with going back to that Google Doc that they originally, we started with, going back to that, and at least getting the high level components, for lack of a better word, the high level properties kind of in place structurally, that kind of align to kind of what we're doing and the amount of use cases that we're ultimately going to be supporting with all this information. So I'll try to at least start that. So by the next time that we meet, we can actually have something to discuss. That's my goal.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Yeah, I can share. So once I go through all the tweaks and um, I add the flexibility, I'll share it, and then hopefully that helps you a lot to put the basics in.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Good, good, good. Is there anything, I know Kim dropped, Izar, you were discussing some things with Kim. And it sounds like the use cases and requirements are going to be kind of a big deal for the privacy things. Is there any other things that maybe we haven't talked about yet that's also going to be kind of critical for privacy use cases?
So here's the thing. The conversations that we are having about privacy, they are more and more pointing at the fact that privacy is less of a technical problem and more of, for lack of a better word, business level problem, right? So it's less the responsibility of a developer and more the responsibility of a product owner, let's put it like that, because they are looking at how the data is being used or misused at the higher level. So the developer gets a user story that says collect location. That doesn't really give them any context to know if this is a privacy issue or not, apart from the fact that perhaps I shouldn't be collecting location. So we are looking for a way to go up a level and still have that view drop down, but it's very conceptual right now.
Okay. Is there we talked a little bit about, and you brought up location information. We started on kind of a taxonomy of sorts of different types of private data. Not data classifications per se, but like we had like an entire thing just for biometrics, for example. And obviously location, there's all kinds of different types of data that could be collected to support any number of these use cases, right? Is that the path we want to go down, more of a formal taxonomy, or do we want to kind of leave it open?
That's the thing. I used to think like that too, but slowly I'm being educated that my thinking wasn't complete. Data can have the value of privacy, but even data that does not have that value over its life cycle could be brought together with other data that also does not have the privacy value and end up being some kind of transformation that becomes a privacy issue.
Got it.
So that's why we're looking up on the business level, because those are the guys that are saying, hey, take that location from here, that other thing from here, put them together, and all of a sudden, boom. Right?
Non-direct
so it's a bit of alchemy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
non-direct identifiers.
Exactly.
So if you put them together, they say a lot. That's where like a common pitfall is that user ID is not PII, but actually you put another identifier next to it.
Learn that you can combine zip code with gender and age and actually get a very good approximation of people's location or whatever, right? I was floored to learn that. But apparently that makes the problem way, way, way more intractable than we always thought that it was, right? So we are trying to approach that from a different angle. How that's going to impact what we're doing here, I don't want to talk without Kim here, but my personal feeling is that we are going to start with the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that, yeah, touches on what you said, that taxonomy and inventory of data. And eventually, I hope we are going to be able to make something a bit more interesting once we can point out that use cases and stuff like that.
Right. Right.
I know that everything you just said is very, very much a problem. And you use the example of zip code. So in UK, it's sort of postcode, which might be sort of 50 or 60 residences. It might be, 200-300 people. But when you know that information, and as you using your own example, you know the age, you know the gender, sometimes it very, very much absolutely like narrows it down to one person. And then you get crap like somebody's getting like advertisements sent to them for baby products, like 4 weeks after they've had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
And that is just, that is where sort of privacy and respect has just totally gone out of the window.
Yeah.
And your example, it even brings another factor in, which, for example, here you're talking about the density, right? The geographic density. So you could say that in the US, which it's more sparse than the UK, that same combination of data would have no value from privacy point of view. But now in the UK, which everything is more concentrated, all of a sudden it does. So we are going back and forth and discussing all some sort of things, and it's funny because every time that I think that I finally understood the thing and reached something, Kim looks at me and goes, "But what if?" And then the whole thing goes down the rail. But it's
That's why
fascinating
Kim is Kim, man.
right? But
Yeah.
it's seriously it's giving me a whole new perspective on things that I only now see how I used to look at this from a much limited point of view.
Yeah.
And it
Same.
doesn't cease to.
The more I get like into, because with AI, like it's interesting because we all kind of are forced to come to the same table. And the more I do it in my day job, it's kind of crazy what I'm learning. And then of course through these conversations as well. And Kim's just a master of what she does. But Mark, were you able to reach out to anyone at your employer on the safety aspects?
Safety.
Yeah. Safety for threat modeling and figure out the use cases for there.
No, I've had a whole bunch of conversations in recent days with security professionals, pulling in like the people from Japan have responded, but things take so long to actually sort of get to a point where I've actually identified who's actually going to be able to really sort of opine on certain areas of expertise and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I would just really like to get a safety perspective in here. I mean, we got the security perspective, I think, fairly well covered. We've got privacy with Kim, and I would really love to get the safety perspective. Think smart cities and all these other things that kind of are all around us that that have an impact. And typically safety or security takes a back seat to to safety, obviously. So from a threat modeling perspective, you might identify a vulnerability in something, but if it's attached to grandma and keeping her alive, then who cares? You care about the primary purpose of that device first. The security is a nice to have in some cases, but I would really love to get that safety perspective in this group at some point.
I'm going to, I got somebody in mind that I'll actually reach out to and he might be able to point me in the right direction.
Okay. All right. That'd be
So,
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned things like smart cities. That is what my employer is like really heavily getting into.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be the entire thing, right? I mean,
Yes.
lot of organizations do like a small piece of something. You know, my employer does a bunch of stuff with computer vision, and based on a bunch of AI, it makes decisions. And sometimes those decisions can affect the physical environment, right? So it's you know, there are safety aspects to some of these things. And I would really like to kind of capture those perspectives because, you know, obviously we're gonna learn a ton from Kim in the process, and it's gonna, what we learn from her obviously will help in our own threat modeling practices, but it's ultimately going to um, be a really good like input into how we actually architect this part of the spec, right? If I didn't know any better, I would architect it based on a you know, just a simple taxonomy, because this is either private data or it's not. You know,
Yep.
if I didn't know any better, that's what I would do. But I've been
The
enlightened.
basic blocks of private data. Yeah,
Right. But
exactly.
I've been enlightened. It cannot be architected that way. So if we discover something similar on the safety aspect, I would love to be able to at least figure out what that is so that we can architect the spec in a way that actually meets their requirements as well.
I've made a note.
Okay. Yeah, let me know if you need to arrange a call. I'd be happy to hop on a call, Mark, you know, whatever. Just let me know.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Petra's gonna work on her thing. I'm gonna get the you know, our part started at least. That way when we meet next, we'll have something to actually discuss at a technical level. Anything else that we need to discuss today?
So the progression is going to be Petra's thing. We throw stones at it, break it to the ground, come up with something better, and then we start working on getting some tools that actually implement it.
That's harsh, man.
Hey, it's reality.
You
But
should run for
no.
you should run for US president.
Again? I can't. I'm not natural born. I can't.
It doesn't matter.
OWASP board, US president, se tu também shows. So, no, but seriously.
Oh,
So we're going to take Petra's work. We're going to build on top of it to get to the BOM format.
yeah, I
And then
think
we're
so.
going to look into the exchange thing to see how we can actually take, for example, PyTM, I think it's the easiest one to modify to actually create that output so that we can start doing the exchange and start talking to other tools and actually show that something works.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what the timeline for that is, Lord only knows, because I don't.
Exactly. I don't know either. We want to do a 1.7 release here soon. I don't think this is going to likely make it. Now, parts of it could make it, but I don't think the entire thing is going to make it for 1.7, which is fine. There's always a 1.8 or 2.0 or whatever we end up doing, right? We want to basically do a major release of the specification every single year has kind of been our target. But even if we have something kind of in draft that people could actually start using in a production kind of way, I think that would be okay as well. There's also there's also the scenario where, you know, OWASP releases something and then maybe 6 months later or something, it becomes an international standard, which is what happened to, I think, 1.6, right? So OWASP released first and then ECMA released ECMA 424 revision 1, which is the international standard part.
So what was the timeline on that? Was that 1.6 came out around April last year, and did it get sort of the ECMA seal of approval? What?
Yeah, it was like End of
Just-
June, beginning of July. It was in the mid last year. So ECMA meets twice a year, like mid like end of June, beginning of July, and in December in Geneva.
So there'll
Which is
be
where all
nothing
this.
going in from CycloneDX or related work groups for June. It'll be end of year, will it now?
Yeah. There's nothing going to happen the first year. There's too many work streams right now. There's a lot of really great ideas going into the next version of CycloneDX. It's becoming too much work, too big of a release. So we're trying to try to trim that down to something a little bit more manageable because we don't want to suffer quality, right? 1.6 had some quality issues that I'm sorry, 1.5 was also a major release. It had some quality issues that we ultimately ended up fixing in 1.6. We don't want to repeat the same pattern, right? We don't want to introduce quality issues in the next version.
So essentially, you're saying it's gonna be a waterfall development.
Yeah, specification development is basically really fast waterfall. Yeah.
It hurts to say so, huh?
Yeah, that's kind of what it is
Sorry, I
because
had to.
you can't fix it after, it's not like you can fix it in the next iteration.
It's
Standards
true, you
development doesn't work
cannot
like that.
question. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. It's very hard
Yeah.
to fix it later.
I
Yeah.
actually
I mean, you still can, but
no, I
Yes,
spoke
Mark?
to a problem just like yesterday or the day before, where people were talking about things that we've actually got to do, and I pointed out that actually the bill of behaviors would really be important with that. And if you're wondering when the hell is it actually going to come to tooling, well, look in the mirror, because if you're not attending the work groups, if you're not getting involved, it
The
takes
tooling's
long.
already there.
Yeah, oh yeah, but I was speaking in general principle as an exhortation to say, get involved and actually make this kind of stuff happen.
Yeah. In the case of like CBOM, right? I mean, the tooling didn't exist. Especially, it's the chicken and egg thing, right? The specification had to come first, and the tooling, eventually came. And now there's a ton of tooling for CBOM. And I would imagine the same thing is likely going to hold true for the threat model data too, right? I mean, you're going to have a scenario where existing tools in the space will eventually, not overnight, but it will eventually adopt the standard. But more importantly, you're going to have new tools created because of the standard that didn't exist today, right? Which is a good thing for our industry, right? It's going to shine a nice bright light on threat modeling. And hey, join our party because it's important. And now it's required through regulation, right? CRA, Secure by Design. All right, with that, I think we're about at time. So does anybody have any last words of wisdom? Izar, Petra?
My only
Steve,
comment is,
yeah, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, is I like the t-shirt.
Thank you.
Should we play a game?
Yes, we need the
You're
t-shirt.
going to Barcelona? Simons, you're going to Barcelona?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did get my new passport sort of like about 4 or 5 days ago, but it's a bit late now to actually book hotels and stuff.
Well, if you end up there, look for me. I have specially made t-shirts just for the conferences. So
Nice.
just to give you an example, the first one is going to be my other LLM is an intern.
All right, I need to look you up then, Izar. I'll see you there. I need to
I will
look you
see you
up,
there.
Izar, then. Yeah. Steve, if I wanted to get access to a recording from last week, I suppose that's on the YouTube channel, or
It would be all on the
where would
YouTube.
that be?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool.
If I recorded it, which I normally do, but
I think
sometimes
you
I do
did.
forget, like Mark reminded me this time. But yeah, if I recorded it, which normally I do, I post them generally within the first week. I think there's a few recordings that I still need to publish. So if you don't see it out there, it still might be, I still might need to publish it. I was on vacation last week, so I was trying to do a bunch of stuff to kind of clear my desk so I could actually enjoy my vacation.
Well, I hope you did.
It's optional.
Yeah, it's optional.
That's the problem in
Awesome.
America. You take about 4 days off and actually call it a vacation. Whereas in
Yeah.
Europe, if you take a good couple of weeks off, now that's a vacation.
Yeah. Yeah, we could learn a few things from our European friends, that's for sure. All right, everyone. I will talk to you later. Have a great rest of your day. And
You
chat
too.
soon. All right. Cheers.